Welcome back to the Grenke Chess Festival 2026 Freestyle Open A, where the leaderboard is absolutely packed heading into round. Vincent Kayama and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave share the top spot on 7 points, while Magnus Carlsen, Jan-Christoph Duda, and several others sit just half a point behind on 6.5. With the tournament entering its final stretch, every game matters enormously. Today, we have one decisive game under the microscope. And it is a heavyweight clash that could reshape the standings completely. Nodirbek Yakubboev, the talented Uzbek Grandmaster rated 2689, is known for sharp, aggressive play and fearless opening preparation. Magnus Carlsen, the legendary Norwegian and highest-rated player in the world at 2888, brings his trademark precision and in-game mastery to every game. With Carlsen a half-point off the lead, he needs a win here to stay in title contention. While Yakubboev has everything to gain with a scalp against the world's best, this is a freestyle chess game, meaning the pieces start from a randomized back rank rather than the classical setup. With the bishops and knights shuffled, standard opening theory goes out the window entirely, and both players must rely on universal chess principles: control the center, develop pieces harmoniously, and ensure king safety. The creative chaos of freestyle chess means that every early decision carries enormous weight, and familiar patterns can quickly give way to entirely new structures. White opens with the c-pawn, immediately staking a claim in the center and fighting for control of the d5 square. In freestyle chess, this kind of space-grabbing move is a sound universal strategy regardless of the back rank setup. Carlsen immediately mirrors with his own c-pawn, meeting White's central ambitions with a direct counter in the spirit of the symmetrical English. This bold response stakes an equal claim in the center right away, and the position is already sharp with both sides angling for control. White develops the bishop aggressively to e4, an active square where it eyes both the center and the kingside. This is a principled developing move that also eyes any future weakness on the long diagonal. Carlsen activates his queen early to c7, connecting the rooks and adding pressure to the c-file. This is a flexible, prophylactic move that keeps options open while eyeing any weaknesses White might create. White advances the g-pawn in an aggressive lunge, signaling kingside ambitions right out of the opening. In freestyle chess, this kind of committal pawn thrust can create rapid attacking chances, but it also weakens White's own king position. Black's knight hops to b6, targeting the c4 pawn and pressuring White's center from the flank. The knight on b6 is very well placed, and Carlsen is already thinking about winning material. White repositions a knight to g3, shoring up the kingside and keeping the pawn on g4 protected. The knight on g3 also eyes the f5 square as a potential outpost. Carlsen strikes, capturing the c4 pawn with his knight and winning material. Black has achieved a concrete gain in the opening, and White must now decide how to fight back. White pushes f4, expanding in the center and eyeing an aggressive setup with two advanced pawns on f4 and g4. This creates real attacking chances on the kingside, but it also opens lines that Black may use in return. And Carlsen hits back immediately with f5, challenging White's pawn center and opening lines toward White's king. This direct counterattack in the center is the engine's top-rated response, and the position becomes extremely double-edged. White captures on f5 with the knight, a move that looks aggressive, but the engine considers this a significant error. The swing here is massive. The evaluation flips from slightly better for White to clearly better for Black. White is chasing material, while Black's position simply becomes better coordinated. A more restrained approach was called for to maintain the balance. Black hits the knight on f5 with the g-pawn, forcing it to retreat or jump away. Carlsen is gaining tempo and pushing White's pieces back while solidifying his own structure. White retreats the knight to h6, a strange square where it is immediately offside and will struggle to return to active play. The engine marks this as a costly error, swinging the evaluation another half-pawn in Black's favor. The knight on h6 is very poorly placed and will be difficult to untangle. Black captures the pawn on f4 with the rook, picking up another pawn while also activating the rook on the f-file. The engine flags this as a mistake, noting there were stronger continuations available, but Carlsen is content to bank material and trust his technique in the in-game. White takes the knight on g8, capturing a piece and keeping the material tension alive. The engine considers this the best practical try, winning back some material while keeping the position complicated. Carlsen captures the bishop on e4 with the rook, and the engine again marks this as inaccurate with a 2.5-pawn evaluation swing. Even so, black's position remains concretely better, an extra pawn and active pieces. Carlsen is simplifying in his trademark style, converting material advantages into a clear technical win. White activates the queen to b3, threatening multiple things at once, including pressure on the c4 knight and the b7 pawn. This is a good practical try, creating complications and forcing black to calculate carefully. Black advances the d-pawn to d5, a move that the engine considers an inaccuracy. Rather than finding the most precise defensive resource, Carlsen pushes the pawn, but the resulting position still favors black significantly. White plays the queen check to b5, gaining tempo and forcing a response from black's king or pieces. This keeps pressure on and tries to generate counterplay before black can consolidate. Carlsen interposes the queen to c6, blocking the check and offering an exchange of queens. The engine notes this is slightly imprecise, but trading queens into a favorable endgame is entirely in keeping with Carlsen's style. White captures on c6, exchanging queens and entering an endgame where black has extra material. This simplification actually helps black, as the resulting positions favor the side with more pawns. Carlsen recaptures with the rook on c6, and the engine marks this as another small inaccuracy. Nonetheless, black's position is clearly better. 2 rooks well placed, extra pawns, and a dominating knight on c4. Carlsen is simply converting. White pushes the d-pawn to d3, threatening to win the knight on c4. This is an important resource, forcing black to make a decision about the knight. Black grabs another pawn with the rook on g4. The engine again marks this as imprecise, but Carlsen is accumulating material steadily, and the engine's preferred alternatives would require very precise calculation. From a practical standpoint, black's advantage is not in doubt. White captures the knight on c4 with the d-pawn, finally winning back a piece. The position remains very difficult for white, but at least the material imbalance is starting to be addressed. Black recaptures on c4 with the d-pawn, maintaining the extra pawn and keeping passed pawns rolling on the queen side. The engine notes this as slightly imprecise, but Carlsen keeps the position under control. White activates the rook to c3, targeting the c4 pawn and trying to create some counterplay. The rook needs to become active before black's pawns become unstoppable. Black's bishop emerges to e5, a powerful central square where it both defends the c-pawn and dominates the long diagonal. The engine flags this as slightly inaccurate, with over 2 pawns of swing, but the bishop on e5 is genuinely strong, and Carlsen is simplifying the task of converting. White relocates the rook to e3, targeting the bishop on e5 and trying to exchange off black's most active piece. This is a natural defensive idea, trying to reduce black's attacking power. The knight jumps to f7, repositioning from the back rank to an active post that supports the center and is safely away from white's rook on e3. The engine marks this as slightly imprecise, but the knight is improving its position. White brings the knight into the game via c2, heading toward d4 or b4 to create some pressure. This is a necessary activation, as white's pieces have been passive for many moves. Black advances the g-pawn to g5, creating space for the king and beginning to activate the kingside pawns. The engine notes this is slightly inaccurate, but Carlsen is methodically advancing his pawns to create more winning chances. White repositions the bishop to f2, defending against threats and eyeing the c5 pawn. The bishop was not contributing much and needs to find a better diagonal. Carlsen slides the rook to g6, a move the engine marks as inaccurate with over 3 pawns of evaluation swing. Even so, black's position remains overwhelmingly better. The rook on g6 supports the g-pawn and keeps white's king under pressure. White sacrifices the knight on e7, taking the e-pawn and forcing the king into the open. This is a desperate practical try, hoping to create enough counterplay to survive. The king captures on e7, accepting the gift. The engine marks this as slightly inaccurate with 3 pawns of swing, suggesting the king should have gone a different way, but Carlsen knows the endgame is still completely winning for black. White posts the bishop on g3, targeting the bishop on e5 and trying to trade down. This reduces black's attacking army slightly, but the extra pawns on the queenside remain decisive. Black centralizes the rook to e6, a powerful square where it supports the king, controls the e-file and keeps an eye on white's weak pieces. The engine flags this as inaccurate with over 3 pawns of swing, but it is a natural and strong-looking move. White sacrifices the rook with a check on f7, forcing the black king to capture. This is a desperate attempt to generate counterplay and complications. Black's king takes the rook. The engine marks this as slightly inaccurate, but Carlsen is happy to take the material, with white down significantly. In pawns and no real counterplay, the endgame is completely winning for black. White captures the bishop on e5 finally, exchanging off black's dominant piece, but the damage is already done, and black's connected passed pawns on the queen side are simply too powerful. Carlsen advances the b-pawn to b5, pushing the queenside pawns forward and creating a connected passed pawn chain. The engine flags this as slightly inaccurate, but the queenside steamroller is already set in motion. White plays i3, trying to create some counterplay and stop the advancing queenside pawns, but at this point, the task is simply too great. Black advances the a-pawn to i5 as well, and with 3 connected passed pawns rolling down the board, the engine swings nearly 4 pawns in black's favor. White cannot stop all of them. White moves the bishop to c7, trying to interfere with the passed pawns and perhaps win the b5 pawn, but the bishop alone cannot stop the queenside avalanche. Carlsen pushes b4, and the engine evaluates this as a decisive error only, in the sense that a stronger move existed, but b4 is still crushing. The pawns are marching forward, and white has no way to stop them all. Over 5 pawns of evaluation swing confirm the position is completely lost for white. White checks with the rook on f3, trying to force the king to an awkward square. This is pure desperation at this point. The king steps to g6, and with nearly 7 pawns of evaluation swing, the position is completely hopeless for white. Carlsen's king is safe, and the passed pawns are unstoppable. White captures the a-pawn with the bishop, winning a pawn but doing nothing to stop the remaining passed pawns. Black's c and b pawns remain very dangerous. The c-pawn advances to c3, threatening to promote and creating a massive connected passer with b4. With nearly 9 pawns of evaluation swing, white is in full zugzwang, and the game is effectively over. White plays b3, trying to slow down the black pawns, but with 2 connected passed pawns on c3 and b4 supported by active rooks, white simply cannot hold. Carlsen swings the rook to g2, cutting off white's king and threatening to support the passed pawns from behind. With 9 pawns of engine advantage, this is the final nail in the coffin. White tries the rook to e3, but there is simply no defense. And Carlsen repositions the rook to f6, keeping white's rook bottled up and supporting the advance of the passed pawns. With over 9 pawns of evaluation advantage, white has no hope and will have resigned very shortly after this move. This game was decided by a series of early inaccuracies from Yakubboev in a chaotic freestyle opening. The knight stranded on h6, the committal g4 push, and allowing black's queenside pawns to roll proved fatal. Carlsen, with his trademark technique, converted the material advantage into an unstoppable passed pawn in game, demonstrating once again why he remains the world's finest player. And that wraps up our Round 8 review from the Grenke Chess Festival 2026 Freestyle Open A. The leaderboard is absolutely on fire heading into the final rounds, and every half point will matter enormously. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Carlsen's technique in that in-game, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe so you never miss a round. See you next game.